Today we will continue with the HTML5 features. The last time we have discussed about drawing a rectangle on the screen, as well as mimicking the movement of a rectangle using the HTML5 drawing features. And this time we will examine more HTML5 features such as the drag and drop. We will also discuss data storage and geolocation. So the HTML, these are new tools that are introduced in HTML5. They are important tools because they are affecting widely the applications on the web, and they are changing the functionality of the web applications. By default, most of the browsers would not allow the image tags or elements to be dragged by default. However, they can be made available. The dragging of these images can be changed or updated. This new HTML5 capability expands our ability to control which elements are draggable. So we can define certain elements that we would like to drag on the screen, and to also where we can drag them on the screen. So the drag and drop features is kind of intuitive and well known to most web users, and because of that it's advantageous for us to include this kind of functionality into the HTML pages that we are creating, because we always want to have the users to enjoy our app and to use it easily, to intuitively find the functionalities that are needed. So in the past, this kind of feature was implemented via complex JavaScript libraries, and now we are making it easy to use by incorporating it into the native HTML. The JavaScript would still be used to handle the mechanics of the dragging and dropping, but it is greatly simplified. So we have a new attribute to identify which page elements are to be draggable. Here is the image tag, and then we say ID logo, provide a path to where the image is located. So part of the path is the file name as well as the directory of where the image is located. This is a directory on the web server that is hosting a web page. It can be a physical directory or a virtual directory. And the next thing we have is the new element that's called draggable. So we will be dragging and dropping objects onto the HTML. So the element is called draggable, and we set this draggable element equal to true. After that comes the standard things about images in HTML. That is the width and the height of the image and the position of the image onto the screen. So the size of the image and the position of the image. And then we can say what we would like to do once this object, once the user starts dragging this object. So on drag, we can have a certain event to be invoked once the user starts dragging this figure. So this is the functionality, new functionality that is provided with HTML5. Here is another image. So SVG stands for the Scalable Vector Graphics. Let's put this in here so that it is clear. So the Scalable Vector Graphics offer designers the ability to draw graphics directly onto the web page. So it could differ from the canvas in several important ways. The most important is that the rendered graphic does not lose its quality. So when we are moving images, or when we are converting, let's say, image from analog to digital form. For example, someone will take a picture with an analog camera and print it on paper. If we are to take this picture from the natural world and convert it to a digital picture that uses pixels, and it has to be stored in a computer memory. The way to do that, we're going to divide the infinite amount of colors and information onto the analog paper picture into pieces or pixels. So these pixels are small dots that take a portion of the screen, and for each of such pixel we assign a color. That whole process, there are two processes involved. One is to divide the picture into pixels, which means we have to choose the number of pixels. We have seen this here. It says 128 by 128. So that's a square matrix. of size 128 horizontally and 128 vertically, and inside of every square into the matrix we have 1 pixel. So total number of pixels will be 128 by 128, and for each of those a color is recorded inside the matrix. Both of the processes, the number of pixels we use and the number of colors that we choose to store, would result in losing parts of the original quality or information of the original picture, which in the analog world, in the real world, where it was taken on picture on paper, printed on paper, has infinite number of pixels and infinite number of colors. But for us to save it in a computer, we have to choose how many pixels we want to save and how many colors we want to save. And so that results in loss of quality and loss of information. Once we start moving the graphics around the screen, the same situation can occur. Parts of the picture quality can be lost. So an important feature here is that to make a difference from the original procedure with the canvas, where the graphics quality can be lost once we start moving it around the screen, with this situation, with this scalable vector graphics, no matter how much we move it or zoom it in on or out, we're not going to lose any of the quality. So for this reason, it makes for higher quality printing than with the canvas drawings. So here is a simple example of scalable vector graphic drawing. The tag starts with SVG. Then we give the package for scalable vector graphics, which is a standard defined on the World Wide Web Consortium, formal World Wide Web organization page. And then we have the height and the width. This time it's 200 by 325. Again, we have to tell how big we want the picture to be and where it is located on the screen. We have the ID of what is the image, so it is SVG1. In this case, the picture is a polygon, so we have to define the certain points into the polygon. And the last element here is the style, that we are also allowed to choose the color and of this image, and whether it has an outline. So here both it has an outline. You can see this gray line around the figure, and then in the inside its color is purple. So this is how we can define a scalable vector graphic into the HTML page. Let's look at the data storage. while the user it is on our web page. For example, if it is an e-commerce page and we are asking the user to enter their name, their address, of what are they ordering and things like this, we might need to save some of this data. We can also save data in terms of the session information. So this kind of data storage is sometimes referred to as web storage, but it will allow the website to store information on the user's computer. So kind of like cookies and session information. The data it is stored on the client machine. This kind of data is useful for several reasons. The local storage can store data for infinite amount of time, indefinitely on the user's computer. Since there is no expiration date, the user can return to the site a year later, and whatever information we stored about this user would still be available. For example, storing the user's last location or any personalized settings that the user have chosen. Can be stored for extended periods of time. The second type is the session storage. In this case, the session is temporarily stored. The whole purpose of the session is to make sure that it is valid only for specific time or specific amount of time. So that is to avoid, for security purpose, to avoid replay attacks. In that case where, let's say, with financial transactions, a user is withdrawing some monies from their bank account, this happens in specific time or session. Since packets are going through the network, packets can be recorded and replayed later. So perfectly valid login, password with money withdrawal amounts, the entire valid packet can be recorded and resent later to the bank. So to avoid this kind of thing, we use sessions and timestamps with web applications. So this kind of, so that when the packet is resent later, it will show up as timed out or invalid because of timestamp. So these sessions serve for this purpose, and so that's why they are data stored in those sessions are temporary. So once the user closes the browser or closes the connection, then this data is no longer valid and it is just deleted, automatically deleted. So in any case, this is data that is being stored on client machine to make a difference from data that is stored in databases or on server machines. So the data that would be stored on server machines or database servers or web servers would be more of what order the customer placed what is the inventory that we have available, shipping information, when is this order going to be sent to the client if it is something that needs to be delivered physically, because they could be ordering services that don't really need to be delivered. But to make a difference from information, customer information, orders for e-commerce applications or for financial applications that are stored in databases and web servers, the data storage we talk about here is on the client side. So the script local storage dot last position, and basically the storage, the data that was stored onto the client like this into this local storage would have an index, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on. We can access them by this particular number. For security purpose, the data that is stored like this is encrypted and only accessed by the website that created it. The HTML websites can be converted into offline applications by instructing the browsers to store all the necessary working files locally onto the user's device. If the user's web connectivity is interrupted for any reason, or if, let's say, the user is in some area that has no internet access or coverage, they could be flying in airplane, or they could have taken a cruise in the sea and the water, and there is no connection. They can still use the application by converting it to an offline application and storing all the necessary elements onto the client machine. Setting up the offline application. So the HTML5 provides this functionality to where we can store the web application locally and use it offline. So the browser would store all the necessary working files and download them and save them into the user's device. So setting this up is relatively easy. We do this by using the manifest attribute. We would add this manifest attribute to the HTML element for each page that we would like to be available offline. So starting with the HTML tag, we have elements, an attribute called manifest, and then we say equals to and give the site or web page or website that we would like to store locally. So this manifest file is referenced whenever the web connection is broken, and the cached files are used instead, so that there is no interruption or no error messages displayed to the user. So the manifest is basically a text file that stores, it's like a list of web applications that we would like to store to be used offline. Let's look at location. Location is a feature that is familiar nowadays to most mobile users and web application users. So it is a good feature for us to consider. By determining the visitor physical location, the website can provide useful tools. For example, a map, a street map of where the user is located, a map or a list of places or shops or restaurants or services that the user might be interested in based on their current location. So these geolocation services available that can be embedded into our HTML application. There are several ways to determine the location. The most common one that is used by maps and vehicle navigations systems is the GPS or global positioning system coordinates. These are captured by satellites. Other tools that can be used is the IP address of the user. So any device that is connected to the internet has an address, IP address, that's its network address. We mentioned in the previous class that in the computer network, every machine, device, whether that's phone, computer, printer, router, or something else that is part of the network, needs to have an address so that we know where it is physically located for the purpose of delivering network packets to that device. And because of that, it needs to have an address. This address is called the IP address. And using this address, we can tell where the device physically is located. The last time we talked about positive and negative impact, or good, why it is good or bad for users that the cell phone companies know the locations of the phones and therefore the locations of the users. We have given some examples that it is good for the users in case of emergency, if they need to call medical help, ambulance, or if they need to call police or something else, that they have some emergency. It is good for them to make the phone call and be known where they are located by their phone. Now, it may not be good for them because if they have privacy issues and they don't want to be tracked, and the location records of where they go and what they do because they want that to be private. But we can tell where they are by using their cell phone location. So there are several ways to determine the location like this, and we can use it into our web application to provide the user something that they would enjoy. For example, coffee shops, restaurants, movie theaters, and some entertainment, or even navigation for where they're located and where they would like to go. So, going back to the cascading style sheets, let's have a brief review. The cascading style sheets we have used so far, or we have used, are like cousins to the HTML5 features. We are continuously developing new features. Well, we have seen some of the features, but new ones are constantly appearing. So modern browsers have added support for cascading style sheets as well as HTML5, and both of those would allow for new styling options to the website designer. For example, borders of images, rounded corners on the shapes or figures, allows to drag and drop objects as well as with their shadows as they're moving, allows for word wrapping, certain custom fonts. We have seen the last time how we can draw a rectangle and rotate it onto the screen and move it through the screen, so it allows for flexible boxes and element rotating and scaling. Animations, as well as a layout which would have multiple columns. So all of these are features that can be used. Let's look at the rounded corners, for example. The way we would round corners from our code is by using border dash radius element, and we can tell with how many pixels we would like our borders to be rounded. For dropping of the shadows, you can see this green rectangle here has a shadow on behind it. We use the text dash shadow element and then give how many pixels of shadow do we want to have and in what color. For custom fonts, something like this beautiful handwritten font here, we can tell font dash family and tell which font we want to use. For example, Pacifico font is used here. There are additional fonts such as the Google Web fonts that can be added. Okay, so in this lesson we have talked about drag and drop features of HTML5 as well as the scalable vector graphics. We've talked about storing certain data into the client side as well as making our location available, our application available offline. We also mentioned that the physical geographical location of the user can be recorded and as to provide useful features to the users. So that is all that we have for the HTML5 elements for today.